Welcome to the Board Game Network. This is James. I'm going to be explaining how to play this game called Warquest, designed by Glenn Drover, put out by Mr. B Games. It plays 2 to 4 players in about 45 minutes per player. So I've just got a bunch of stuff out here. Here is your kind of your setup. You're going to shuffle your power cards, flip 4 up, and if you get a market, you just take those and keep flipping. So you want 5 non-market cards and just mix those market cards back into the deck. So you've got 5 non-market power cards up here. You are going to separate your quest cards into level 1, 2, and 3 down here. You're going to shuffle them up separately. You're going to put 3s on the bottom. You're going to put 2s on top of the 3s, and you're going to deal 2 level 1s to each player, and the rest of the level 1s go out of the game. You are going to shuffle your event cards. You're going to take this one out first, the one with the star on it, all quiet. Shuffle those event cards, deal either 12 or 11 or 15 down. 11 is the short game, 15 is the long game. Or pick however many cards you want to play based on how long you want to play. And then you're going to put the all quiet on top, so the first card that you run into, nothing's going to happen. So it gives you 1 extra round before things start happening on the board. So in total I've got 12 cards here for the short game, or 16 for the long game. You are going to give 20 gold to each player, and 20 gold is 20 coins. These are coins. Don't look at the color. This is 1s and these are 5s. So 5 of these would be 20. You're going to give each player 2 leaders, 1 of each kind, and they'll have the same color base on there. You just put those, snap those on the bottom of the pieces. The round ones are your leaders, and then give all of their tokens to them. Here is the conquest cards. You are going to shuffle the star, the ones with the stars, the protect cards, shuffle those up, hand 1 to each player. You're going to shuffle up the ones with the dagger. You're going to give 1 to each player. You're going to take the rest of them, shuffle those up, give 1 to each player. The rest of the stars go out of the game. The other 2, the dagger and the non-dagger, 1 of each, or the rest of the decks get shuffled together, and then you got to draw a deck. You are going to put each race in its home region, and so you just look, and this says Goblin Land, so the goblins come here. Each race has a melee and a ranged creatures. So here your goblins have, you got some goblin archers and some goblin axemen. So those are around in the different places on the board. You got 5 different races. And so you decide who the starting player is, and that's just going to be the starting player for the whole game. And he's going to put his 2 leaders in a city. Actually, he doesn't start. You decide who the start player is, and then the person to the right of him gets to place their leaders first and their army, and then it rotates around. So the start player actually goes last with placing. So they always have to start in a city, and a city has a number on the map, and that's how much you can tax that city. And your army, they suggest if you're a new player, or if you're new to playing this game, you take 1 melee and 1 ranged of each race. And then that's your army, and they all will start there. Otherwise, if you're an experienced player, you're going to start with your 20 coins and then buy your creatures that you want, and then the cost is here on the back of your book. It tells you the cost in this column for the different races. But if you decide to take 2 of each race, then instead of starting with 20 gold, you're going to start with 3 gold. And that actually adds up to, I think, 27 points, 27 coins to get 2 of each. So you're actually getting a lot more if you are the inexperienced person. You're going to take one of these play mats. These are combat mats that have the different rankings when you fight. And then you are ready to go. So there are different actions available, and these actions, you can take up to 3 actions. They're listed here on the back of your rule book, and you can take them in any order. You can repeat them usually, but there are some of them with limitations on repeating. The first one is move and combat. Move and combat is 1 action. So if you move into a region with another player, then you have to stop and then you're going to fight them. So that's only 1 action to do that. You'll notice that there's the kingdoms are outlined in a certain color, and then within the kingdoms there's dotted lines, and those dotted lines separate regions. So each kingdom might have 5 regions or something. So when you're moving, you can move up to 3 movement points worth of movement. And your armies move together. And an army is defined as a leader and then whoever troops are with that leader. So both leaders could be in a single army and travel around, or they could split up. But you don't want troops by themselves, because troops by themselves disappear at the end of the game and they all go back to their homelands. Because they're hired mercenaries, so they're not going to hang around. So they have to be with a leader. So you can move, say you're moving 3 points and you've got your armies here. Let's just throw some up here. And this one goes here, that's 1 movement point, 1 more movement point, and then another movement point. So that's 3 movement points, so that would be 1 full action. Or you could take a single army and move it 3 spaces. You cannot move across mountains. If you move across a river, then you have to stop on the other side. That's the end of, you can't keep moving after you go across a river unless there's a bridge on that river, and then you can take it just like a normal space. And then you have to, if you do encounter a battle, you have to do all of your movement for that action before you do any of the battles. And then if you have more than 1 army in a space, they all attack as 1 army. Your second action that you can do is conquer. And conquer just means you put your token that shows that you've conquered the region. You just put it down in that region, and you put it with the colored side up and not the splattered side. So that shows that that's now your region. If an opponent has a control marker in there, then his control marker comes off, and your control marker with your faction side up, it has to go in a space with 1 of your armies. Your third option is to tax, and you're taxing cities that are your cities, and for them to be your cities, they have to have your control marker on that city. But you do not have to have an army there. You just have to have a control marker there. And then you get money, you get coins based on the number that's in that city. So you could tax across several different cities, but each tax is a separate action. You can recruit troops. So to recruit troops, you have to have one of your leaders into the area where one of the races is at, and then you have to pay the cost for whatever you're buying. Now you are limited to 5 troops of a single race in a single army. So you can have more than 5 orcs if they're across more than 1 army, if they're in 2 armies or 3 armies or something. But if you ever combine those armies into the same space, you're limited to 5 of a single race in a single army. You can recruit lieutenants, and lieutenants cost 6, but that's another leader. And you are limited to 2 lieutenants, each person limited to 2, and there's only 8 lieutenants, I believe, that come with the game. So all of your pieces. You're limited to the number of pieces you do have. But if you buy another lieutenant, that allows you to split off and have another army if you want to. Acquire a power card. So that's these cards here, and you just buy them based on the coin cost up here, and you'll notice some of them, the spells have another cost, and they cost that when you use them. Most of them, or some of them, do not have another cost because it's not a spell. So this says, owner receives 1 free dwarf foot troop when recruiting dwarves. And so those just go face up by you. So if you come over and you recruit some dwarves, then you get an extra dwarf footman when you do that. There are 2 kinds of power cards. There are resource cards and market cards. And market cards, when you flip them up, they have a location on them, and there's not really very many of them in the deck. And they've got a star here. This says Farmer's Market in Burgal. So you look for Burgal, the city, and then that card is just there. And so when somebody goes to that region, then they can buy Burgal as an action. It says owner receives 3 gold every time Burgal is taxed. So even if somebody else owns Burgal, if you have this card, then you get 3. So that's the way market cards work. Resource cards, you have to have a leader in a city to purchase one of those resource cards. You're limited to 1 card per city per turn that you buy. So if you want more than 1, you have to be in more than 1 city. You pay the cost, you place it face up in front of you, and you're limited to 5 power cards total. So if you ever get more than 5, you have to discard 1. Once you've purchased, what happens is they slide down and you flip a new one up on the left. And the reason for that is the end of round, the rightmost one gets discarded. So that's power cards. And then quest cards. Quest cards are cards that you have in your hand. You got a couple of them at the beginning of the game, remember? And so you just look at them, and whenever you can meet the qualifications, then you can do that quest. This says the pit, and annihilate the imp demons that have been breeding there. So you're going to look for the pit on the board, and then you're going to have to do a quest, and here is the attack value, the number of dice they use. Here are the number of wounds it takes, and this is the level of the card. So it's essentially, it's like you're fighting one of your opponents, but it's a quest. And then if you succeed, you get this many victory points. When you do a quest, you can only have 1 leader and 1 troop, if you want to, that try to complete the quest. Now the rest of your army can be in there, but only 2, the leader and a troop, can attempt the quest. Troops can be killed but not leaders. So based on the die of the quest, you can lose your troop. The leader attacks first, and the way fighting works, fighting is very similar in quests as it is when you're fighting an opponent. You take the number of dice. So both of your leaders, the warlord and the lieutenant, both have an attack rating of 2. That means you take 2 dice. Now these dice are not normal dice. There's only one side with a hit, which is your skull, and one side with a retreat or a flee with a tattered banner. All the other ones are empty blank faces. So only 1 and 6 is a hit. So you get 2 dice for each leader, and then depending on what troop you bring in to do the quest, you might either have 1 more die or 2 more dice. And so you're going to roll, and you're trying to get hits to do the hit points of the quest, to equal or exceed those hit points. So only skulls or hits. You have to do greater than or equal to the number of hits to defeat that monster or that quest. And then once you're done, the monster attacks, and the player determines where the hits go if the quest gets hits. If the leader takes lethal damage, so if he takes as many damage as his defense rating, so 2 hits, he does not die, but he is defeated. If the companion takes hits enough on his defense rating, then he actually is defeated and goes back home to his pool. If there are 2 or more fleas rolled in the same round, then the companion returns to the pool also. So he flees, goes back to the pool. Once you've done this for 1 round, and if you have not defeated the quest, you can choose to continue on. And if you do that, then both sides get an extra die for the 2nd round, and then another extra die for the 3rd round, and this can go up to 5 rounds. And if you haven't defeated the quest within 5 rounds, then the quest ends. You do not defeat it. So the quest can end if the monster or the leader has been defeated. It can also end if the leader retreats, or it can end if it's gone 5 rounds. And so no matter what, you discard that quest. If you were successful or you were defeated, you discard that quest, and then you're going to draw you a new quest. If you're successful, you get the victory points on the card, and you get 2 gold. Victory points on the card are simply these victory point tokens here. And you got to watch them. They don't all have the same number on both sides. So you don't want to just go flipping them over. See, here's 5s on this side, and here's 1s on this side. So that's all of your actions. We need to go into combat a little bit. I explained it's a lot like the quest cards. However, you put your troops onto the battle board, and the way that works is you have only 5 spaces on each rank. You've got the front rank, and the front rank are your melee troops, and then the 2nd rank would be your ranged weapon troops. And if somebody doesn't fit on one of those ranks, they can be back here in the reserves. And the 4th rank is fleeing, if they flee. So here's a reference right here on how this works. And this is simultaneous resolution. The first attack is the rear rank, so the archers, the ranged weapons, they get to do their roll, and then they're going to get 1 die per attack rating that they have here. The defender gets to roll and assign damage first. Then you reinforce. So if you lose some people, if some people die and there's extra spaces, you can bring people up from your reserves to the appropriate space, whether they are ranged or whether they are melee. And then the front rank attacks. And then again, this is simultaneous resolution. And then you can reinforce again from the reserves. And then rally. Rally means 1 person that's in the flee. So whenever an opponent rolls a flee, a tattered banner on a die, then whoever he targets moves back to the flee rank, the 4th rank. So a single flee causes a troop on the other side to move back to the flee. When you're assigning damage, the player who did the die rolls gets to assign the damage. Character gets to choose to target either the front rank or the 2nd rank, since he is a ranged creature. When you're reinforcing from your reserves, it's required that you bring up troops, but if you have leaders, you don't have to bring the leaders forward. So when you're rallying, you can bring one troop from the flee back up into the reserves, so they would move up, and then on the reinforced, then they could move up again. So they'd be out of combat for a round. And you can retreat. The attacker chooses whether to retreat first and then the defender. And if you're retreating, for the attacker, you have to move back into a territory that you came from. If you're the defender, you would have to retreat into a non-combat space. Whoever the victor is gets 5 victory points, plus an extra victory point for every troop that's been eliminated on the opponent's team. You would remove any wound tokens at the end of the combat, and the only ones that would have wound tokens are the ones that can have a defense of 2, so they can take 2 wounds. If the warlord is killed, so that's your main leader, the warlord, if he's killed, then he actually comes back in the next round and you get to purchase more characters. So no player is ever out of this game. They stay in for the whole game. They do essentially lose a turn because the player comes back with a new warlord in a city that he controls with one of his control markers. If there is no legal place to come back, then he can come back in any city or region that does not have an opponent's control marker in it. The amount of army that you get when you come back with your warlord is based on the amount of troops that you lost in the combat. So you would just take the values, the cost of them, you add them up, and then you can spend that amount on your next army. And you do not get any change. So if you don't use it, then you just don't get any money for it. And then that's your whole turn for the next turn. So you're out for 1 round if you lose your warlord. Here's how you win this game. The game ends after the last event card has been drawn. So you flip the last one up and then you go 1 more round. And at the end of every round, you're flipping an event card up, and you remember you're replacing one of these. You're taking the rightmost one off, sliding down and putting another power card up. You get 1 victory point for every 3 control markers you have on the board. So regardless of whether they are active or inactive, which is the other side, and the way these become inactive is when you use them to complete a quest. You might say something like, oh, you complete the quest if you have controlled 3 regions or 6 regions or something, and then you have to flip them over because you can't use them again for another quest. Or sorry, a conquest. But if you move back into that space, then you can take an action to flip it back over so that you can complete a future conquest using that same space. So again, for winning, you get 1 victory point for every 3 control markers, and you get 2 victory points for every city that you control. And then you're going to also add up any victory points that you got from cards or that are on any of your cards, victory points. And then whoever has the most victory points is the winner. Now that that's the whole game, there's a little bit more to this. In combat, each race has their own ability. And leaders, either your warlord or your lieutenant, they can rally a troop from the retreat or the flee to the reserves at the end of every round if they are in reserves. So if they're up here fighting, they can't do this. So essentially you get a second person to come up from the flee into the reserves if you have a leader in the reserves, for each leader in the reserves. Leaders cannot retreat, and they are the last troop in a rank to take damage. So your opponent cannot target them until everybody else in that rank is dead or gone, have fled or something. A dwarf must be targeted first in a rank. An elf footman can attack, even though he's on the front rank, he can attack when the rear rank attacks. So he gets to attack earlier than the other players. And if during the first attack, so the rear rank attacks, if they kill front rank of the opponent, then that front rank is not going to be able to attack back. So that's the advantage of having an elf footman attack early. An orc footman gets an extra die, an extra attack die on his first round only of an attack. A satyr, for each flee result that he rolls, he gets to roll another die and attack again. And this is the maximum of the number of satyrs on the rank that is attacking. So let's say we've got 2 satyrs up here. Let's throw a couple of them up here. And so they're going to each get, oh, and if you notice the knobs on these, the front knob on the face of a creature, that's his attack, how many attack dice he gets, and the back knobs is the defense, how many wounds he can take. So these both roll 1 dice, so on an attack they would roll 2 dice, and if one rolled a flee, then he actually gets to pick up another dice and roll it to get another, to try to get another wound or another flee. But you only get up to the number of dice that you have satyrs in the rank. So you're not rolling the satyr separately. If you get 3 fleas but you only have 2 satyrs, you only get 2 extra dice. Now goblins, if you are victorious in the goblin, they actually get another attack as the opponent is fleeing. If you've defeated the opponent, the front 2 ranks only get 1 last attack, and only hits count. Fleas don't count for goblins. Oh, that's this game of Warquest. That's how you play it. This game is huge. You better make sure you got a big table for this, and there's a ton of pieces. You're bringing those around the board. That's how you play Warquest. Hey, make sure you tune in to all of our videos here so you can learn how to play games like Warquest at the Board Game Network. Here at youtube.com/boardgamenetwork, at facebook.com/boardgamenetwork, and also on Board Game Geek.